Have you ever been told you're not good enough by the people who are supposed to love you most? What happens when they push you so far that you have no choice but to show them exactly what you're made of? The air in my in-laws' dining room was thick enough to cut with the polished silver knives sitting beside our plates. It was always like this, a suffocating blend of expensive perfume, simmering resentment, and the scent of a roast beef that was perpetually overcooked. Tonight, the tension had an extra edge. It was my husband Derek's birthday, a high holiday in the Hayes family calendar, and I was, as always, the designated sinner at the feast. "Serafina, darling," my mother-in-law Carol began, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that could curdle milk. She dabbed her lips with a linen napkin, her diamond rings catching the light from the chandelier above. "Derek was just telling us about your little hobby. Still looking at old paintings?" I forced a smile, the muscles in my cheeks aching from the effort. "My art history degree isn't a hobby, Carol. I'm actually consulting for a few small galleries." "Galleries," she repeated, drawing the word out as if it were a strange, distasteful insect. How quaint. Across the table, my sister-in-law, Brittany, let out a delicate, mocking laugh. She flicked her perfect blonde hair over her shoulder and held up a brand new, eye-waterily expensive handbag. "Speaking of real work, Daddy bought me this for getting my promotion at the firm. I'm a junior vice president now." She looked pointedly at me. "Some of us have ambition." The words hung in the air, each one a small, sharp stone, aimed directly at me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I looked at Derek, my husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, my defender. He was staring intently at his plate, meticulously cutting a piece of beef, as if it were the most important task in the world. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He never did. His father, a silent, imposing man who communicated mostly through grunts of approval for his wife and daughter, finally spoke. "Good work, Brittany. That's a Hayes woman." The conversation moved on, a river flowing around the rock of my silent humiliation. I felt like a ghost at the table, a specter they were all determined to ignore. Then Carol clapped her hands together, a sharp, commanding sound that made everyone fall silent. "Now, for the main event," she announced, her eyes glittering. "For our annual Christmas reunion, I've booked something truly special." She slid a stack of glossy brochures down the long mahogany table. They fanned out in a perfect cascade of winter wonderlands and smiling, beautiful people. I picked one up. "Cypress Key Lodge and Spa," the gold-embossed letters read. The photos inside were breathtaking. Sprawling log cabins with stone fireplaces, an ice-skating wreck under a string of fairy lights, a grand ballroom that looked like something out of a fairy tale. "It's the most exclusive resort in the state," Brittany said, her voice smug. "They have a 3-year waiting list, but Mother pulled some strings." A genuine flicker of excitement sparked in my chest. Maybe this was a chance to reconnect, to be part of the family away from this stifling house. "It looks incredible," I said, a smile touching my lips for the first time all night. "I can't wait." Carol's smile was thin and sharp, a blade in the candlelight. She reached out and gently took the brochure from my hands. "Oh, Serafina, honey," she said, her voice a low, condescending pour. "This is a trip for family." The room went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. I could feel every eye on me. "We just didn't think you could afford the expenses," Carol continued, her gaze unwavering. "The spa packages, the gala tickets, the ski rentals, it all adds up. And honestly, we don't want you feeling out of place." Brittany chimed in, twisting the knife. "Yeah, it would be so awkward. You wouldn't have anything to wear to the gala anyway. All your clothes are, well, you know," she giggled, a sound like breaking glass. They laughed. A small, polite chuckle from Carol's husband, a full-throated cackle from Brittany. The sound echoed in the sudden vast silence of my world. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a desperate, trapped bird. I turned my gaze to Derek, my last hope. My eyes were screaming. Say something. Please. Defend me. Defend your wife. He cleared his throat. He finally looked up, but not at me. He looked at his mother. He gave a small, helpless shrug, a gesture that shattered what was left of my heart. They have a point, Sarah, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It's expensive. That was it. The final verdict. I was publicly tried, convicted, and sentenced. I was banned. I was excluded. I was a failure, a loser, a nobody who wasn't even worthy of a family vacation. The humiliation wasn't just an emotion, it was a physical force, a wave that washed over me, stealing the air from my lungs and leaving me cold and empty. They picked up the brochures again, their voices bright and animated as they started planning the seating chart for the Christmas Eve gala. They talked about sleigh rides and champagne toasts. They talked as if I wasn't there, as if my chair was empty. And in that moment, I realized it was. I had been an empty chair at this table for years. Slowly, carefully, I placed my napkin on the table. I didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. I pushed my chair back, the sound of its legs scraping against the polished floor, a jarring screech in their happy chatter. They paused for a second, looking up at me with mild annoyance, before dismissing me and returning to their plans. I walked out of the dining room, down the long, silent hallway, and out the heavy front door. I didn't look back. As the door clicked shut behind me, I could hear the faint, muffled sound of their laughter, the soundtrack to the end of my life as I knew it. The cold night air hit my face, a shocking welcome slap. I stood on the perfectly manicured lawn, the darkness wrapping around me like a shroud. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I could never go back. The first night, I slept in my car. I parked it in a 24-hour supermarket lot, tucked between a beat-up pickup truck and a family minivan, and tried to make myself small in the driver's seat. The fabric of the seat was cold and unwelcoming against my cheek. Every passing headlight felt like an accusation, every distant siren a judgment. The laughter from the dinner table echoed in my head. A cruel, relentless loop, Brittany's sneer, Carol's dismissive smile, and worst of all, Derek's shrug. That one small, cowardly gesture had undone everything. It had erased our vows, our shared memories, our entire life together. I had married him for love, a bright, hopeful love that felt like it could conquer anything. I had believed that his quiet nature was a sign of strength, not weakness. I was wrong. For 5 years I had endured the constant chipping erosion of my self-worth at the hands of his family. Every joke about my useless art history degree, every backhanded compliment, every time I was talked over or ignored, I had swallowed it all, telling myself it was the price of peace, the cost of loving Derek. But last night the price had become too high. I had been declared bankrupt. The feeling of being a failure was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until it was hard to breathe. They had called me poor, a loser, a nobody, and huddled in the cold, sterile interior of my 10-year-old sedan, I believed them. What had I accomplished? I had a degree that my own husband's family considered a joke. I worked part-time, just enough to cover my own small expenses, so they couldn't call me a gold digger, a term I knew Carol used behind my back. I had poured all my energy into being a good wife, into trying to win the approval of people who were never going to give it. When the sun finally rose, casting a sickly gray light over the parking lot, I drove. I had a few $100s in my bank account, enough for a few nights in the cheapest motel I could kid on the outskirts of the city. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and pine-scented cleaner. The bedspread was a scratchy, faded brown, and the water from the tap tasted of rust. It was a miserable, lonely place, and it felt like home. It felt like what I deserved. I unpacked my small overnight bag, the one I had naively brought to Derek's birthday dinner thinking I might stay over. My hands were numb, my movements mechanical. As I pulled out a sweater, something heavy tumbled out with it, and landed on the thin carpet with a soft thud. It was a worn, leather-bound journal, its corners softened with age. My grandmother, Eleanor, had given it to me a week before she passed away 2 years ago. "For your thoughts, my Serafina," she had said, her voice thin but her eyes as sharp as ever. "They are more valuable than you know." I ran my fingers over the supple leather. I hadn't written a single word in it. I hadn't felt my thoughts were worth recording. Tucked inside the front cover, I found a sealed envelope I'd completely forgotten about. My name was written on the front, in her elegant, looping script. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. The letter inside was written on her favorite cream-colored stationery. "My dearest Serafina, if you are reading this, it means you are feeling lost. I know you, my girl. I know you feel things deeply, and I know you have a tendency to believe the loudest voices in the room, even when they are the cruelest. Do not listen to them. Listen to me now. You are not small. You are not useless. You have a strength in you that is quiet, but it is as strong as steel. You see the world in a way others do not. You see the Theo in beauty, the story in a brushstroke, the history in a forgotten object. That is a rare and powerful gift. I have loved you your entire life, and I have always, always believed in you. I have left you something more than just my love. It is a key, a chance, but it is a key you can only use when you are ready to unlock your own door. When you feel you have nothing left, when you have finally decided that you are worth more than what they tell you, go see Mr. Finch. He holds the key." Tears, I didn't know I had been holding back, streamed down my face, dripping onto the precious letter. My grandmother. She had seen me. She had truly seen me. Mr. Alistair Finch. I remembered him from the reading of my grandmother's will. He was her lawyer, an impeccably dressed man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a sharp, witty. He had given me a small, sad smile that day, and I hadn't thought of him since. Driven by a desperation that felt like the last flicker of a dying candle, I found his law firm online. Finch, Covington and Stowe. It was in the heart of downtown, in one of the gleaming steel and glass towers that scraped the sky. I called the number, my voice shaking. A crisp, professional receptionist answered. I asked for Mr. Finch, fully expecting to be told he was busy, that I would need an appointment weeks from now. "Whom may I say is calling?" "Serafina Hayes," I whispered. There was a pause. Then, "Please hold one moment, Miss Hayes." A few seconds later, a warm, familiar voice came on the line. "Miss Hayes? Serafina? I have been waiting for your call." An hour later, I was standing in front of his office. The lobby was a symphony of polished marble, dark wood, and hushed power. I felt like a fraud, a stray cat who had wandered into a palace. My cheap clothes and worn-out shoes felt like a costume. When I was shown into his office, Mr. Finch stood up from behind a massive mahogany desk. He wasn't smiling with pity. He was smiling with respect. "Please, come in, Serafina. Sit down," he said, gesturing to a plush leather armchair. "Can I get you some tea? Coffee?" "No, thank you," I managed to say. He sat down, folding his hands on the desk. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he began. "She wasn't just a sweet old lady who enjoyed gardening, as she led most people to tell. She was one of the most brilliant and fearless investors I have ever had the privilege of representing." Was it brilliant? I blinked, confused. "Investor? A secret one?" "Yes," he said with a small smile. "She started with a small inheritance of her own, and over 50 years built a staggering portfolio. Real estate, tech startups, blue-chip stocks, hospitality groups. She had an instinct for value that was nothing short of genius." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And she left it all to you." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "Her entire estate. A massive inheritance," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But it came with a very specific condition in her will. A condition I was legally bound to uphold." "What condition?" I whispered. That I was not to tell you about it, not to give you access to a single penny, until you demonstrated the strength of character to stand on your own 2 feet. She was terrified that if you came into the money too soon, your husband's family would devour it. And you, in the process, she wanted you to find your own worth first, before you found out about your net worth. He leaned forward, his eyes kind. I've been monitoring the situation, as per her instructions, discreetly of course. I've known about the difficulties you faced. When you called me today, having left that house for good, I knew the condition had been met. Your humiliation, as you probably call it, was the final catalyst. You leaving them last night proved you were ready. He smiled. A genuine, proud smile. Eleanor would be so proud of you, Serafina. I sat there, in that grand, quiet office, the world spinning around me. Inheritance. Investor. Proud. These were words I couldn't connect to myself. But as I looked at the kind, steady face of Alistair Finch and clutched the letter from my grandmother in my hand, a tiny, fragile seed of belief began to sprout in the barren wasteland of my heart. Maybe they were wrong about me. Maybe I wasn't a nobody after all. The days that followed were a whirlwind, a dizzying blur of shock and transformation. The world I knew had cracked open, and a new one, terrifying and exhilarating, was taking its shape around me. My first act of defiance was to turn off my phone. I couldn't bear to hear Derek's voice. I knew what the voicemails would be like. I could picture the progression perfectly. First, annoyance. Sarah, where are you? You can't just walk out of my birthday dinner. Mom is furious. Then, anger. This is ridiculous, Serafina. You're being childish. Whatever my family said, you need to get over it and come home. You're embarrassing me. Finally. The pathetic, pleading stage. Sarah, please, just come back. We can talk about it. I miss you. I didn't need to hear them to know they would contain no apology, no acknowledgement of his failure, only a selfish desire for his comfortable life to return to normal. Ignoring them was the first brick I laid in the foundation of my new life. My life split into 2 distinct, secret halves. The first half was lived in the quiet anonymity of my new apartment. After 2 days in the depressing motel, Mr. Finch had insisted on finding me a better place. It wasn't a flashy penthouse. It was a discreet, furnished apartment in a secure building on the other side of town. A place where no one knew me. A place that felt like a sanctuary. A war room. For the first time in my life, I signed a lease and paid a security deposit with money that was unequivocally mine. The feeling was intoxicating. I spent my nights there, surrounded by takeout containers and stacks of books. Mr. Finch had given me books with titles like Principles of Corporate Finance and Strategic Asset Allocation. The second half of my life was spent with Mr. Alistair Finch, who quickly became more than just a lawyer. He became my ally, my mentor, my guide through the bewildering new landscape of my inheritance. His office became my classroom. We would sit for hours at his vast mahogany desk, which he would cover with documents, stock portfolios, property deeds, business ledgers, trust agreements. He was infinitely patient, explaining everything in simple, clear terms. He never made me feel stupid for not knowing the difference between a hedge fund and a mutual fund. Your grandmother didn't just leave you money, Serafina, he told me one afternoon, sliding a thick binder across the desk. She left you power. Money is just a tool. Power is knowing how to use it. That's what I'm going to teach you. He showed me how my grandmother had seen the world. She didn't just see a company, she saw its leadership, its potential for growth, its vulnerabilities. He taught me to read a balance sheet, not just as a list of numbers, but as a story about a company's health and its future. And he taught me about myself. You told me you had a useless art history degree, he said, peering at me over his spectacles. Eleanor thought it was your greatest asset. An art historian is trained to see what others miss. You look at a painting, and you see the composition, the artist's intent, the historical context, the subtle details that reveal its true value. You're trained to spot fakes, to recognize authenticity. Serafina, that is the exact same skill set required to be a great investor. For the first time, my education didn't feel like a punchline. It felt like a secret weapon. But the struggle was immense, more tangible than I could have ever imagined. There were nights I would stare at pages of financial reports until the numbers swam before my eyes, my head pounding with exhaustion. Panic would rise in my throat, a cold, metallic taste of fear. The old voices would creep back in. You can't do this. You're a fraud. You're just a poor, useless girl playing dress-up in a rich woman's world. They were right about you. One afternoon, I nearly broke. We were going over a particularly complex real estate deal, and I just couldn't grasp the concept of commercial zoning variances. I threw my pen down on the desk in frustration, the sound echoing in the quiet office. I can't do it, Alistair, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. It's too much. I don't understand any of this. I'm just an art historian. I'm not smart enough for this. Mr. Finch didn't say anything for a long moment. He simply got up, walked over to a window that overlooked the bustling city below, and gestured for me to join him. Look down there, Serafina, he said softly. What do you see? I see buildings, cars, people, I stammered. I see a composition, he replied. I see patterns of movement. I see the old, historic buildings standing proudly next to the new, glass towers. I see a city that is constantly changing, evolving. You see that too, don't you? You see the story of it. He turned to face me, his eyes full of a faith that I couldn't yet find in myself. Your grandmother didn't choose you because she thought you were a financial genius. She chose you because you have vision. You see the value and the beauty where others just see chaos. That is not a useless skill, Miss Hayes. That is a weapon. Now, let's go back and talk about zoning. His words were a lifeline. His unwavering belief became the bedrock of my transformation. I went back to the desk, picked up my pen, and I listened. I learned. The war was fought in the quiet of his office and the solitude of my apartment, but it was the most important war of my life. I was fighting for myself, and for the first time, I was starting to believe I could win. Weeks bled into a month. The leaves on the trees outside my apartment window turned from green to fiery shades of red and gold, then fell, leaving stark, bare branches against a gray sky. The world was preparing for winter, and I was preparing for war. During one of our marathon sessions, Mr. Finch and I were reviewing a list of corporate holdings within my grandmother's portfolio. My eyes scanned the pages of names and numbers, a language that was slowly becoming less foreign to me. Most were just names on a page: tech firms, pharmaceutical companies, manufacturing conglomerates. But then, one name jumped out at me, and my heart gave a sudden, sharp jolt. The Monarch Group, I read aloud. Mr. Finch looked up. Ha! Yes, a fine holding. Eleanor got in on the ground floor with them 30 years ago. A small but very prestigious hospitality group. They specialize in high-end, exclusive resorts. A very solid, very profitable investment. My mind was racing, connecting dots with a speed that surprised me. Hospitality group, exclusive resorts. What properties do they own, Alistair? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He swiveled his chair to his computer, typed for a moment, and then turned the screen towards me. A list of 5 properties appeared. My eyes went straight to the third one on the list. Cypress Key Lodge and Spa. I stared at the name, the letters seeming to glow on the screen. The place where my husband's family, was going for their perfect Christmas reunion. The place I was banned from. The place where I was deemed too poor, too useless, too much of a nobody to even set foot. A slow, audacious idea began to form in the back of my mind. It started as a tiny, wicked spark, but in the space of a heartbeat, it roared into a blazing inferno. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about justice. It was about taking the very symbol of my humiliation and turning it into the stage for my victory. I didn't want simple revenge. I wanted poetry. I took a deep breath, the air in the quiet office feeling electric. I looked from the computer screen to Mr. Finch, whose expression was one of polite curiosity. "Alistair," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "My grandmother's shares in the Monarch Group, how significant are they?" He raised an eyebrow, intrigued by my sudden interest. "Significant. She was a major shareholder, about 35%. It gives you a seat on the board, considerable influence. Is it enough to take control?" He paused, studying my face, seeing the new, hard light in my eyes. "To take control of the entire company, that would require a majority stake. Over 50%. It would mean acquiring at least another 16% of the shares from other investors. It would be a complex and potentially hostile takeover." The old Serafina would have shrunk from those words, hostile takeover. It sounded aggressive, ruthless, but the old Serafina was gone, left behind in that cold dining room. "I want to do it," I said, the words tasting of power and certainty. "I want to buy the company." Mr. Finch was visibly taken aback. He leaned back in his chair, a slow, wide grin spreading across his face. He looked genuinely delighted, like a proud teacher watching his star pupil make a brilliant, unexpected move. "An aggressive move, Miss Hayes," he said, a chuckle in his voice. "A truly aggressive move. Your grandmother would have loved it." He leaned forward again, all business now. "It won't be easy. The other major shareholders will fight it. It will be expensive and it will be fast. We'll need to move before word gets out." "I don't care," I said, my resolve hardening into something unbreakable. "I want it." "Very well," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Then let's draw up a battle plan. We have a company to acquire." The plan was set in motion. The secret war had found its battlefield. I was no longer just defending my own small territory. I was launching a full-scale invasion. They had kicked me out of their party, so I was going to buy the ballroom. The days became a frantic blur of strategy sessions and legal maneuvering. Mr. Finch was in his element, a seasoned general planning a complex campaign. I was his eager lieutenant, absorbing every detail, learning every tactic. We worked in secret, using shell corporations and third-party brokers to begin quietly buying up available shares of the Monarch Group. Every transaction was a small victory, a silent step closer to my goal. I lived and breathed the acquisition. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My apartment, once a sanctuary, was now a command center, its walls covered in charts and diagrams tracking share prices and shareholder profiles. I was running on caffeine and adrenaline, the fire in my belly burning brighter than my exhaustion. One evening, my phone, which I usually kept on silent, buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another spam call. But something made me answer. "Hello? Sarah? Is that you?" The voice was hesitant, reedy, and instantly recognizable. It was Uncle Robert, Carol's brother. The enabler. The man who had sat silently at the dinner table, his eyes full of a pained, guilty sympathy that he never dared to express. "Yes, Robert," I said, my voice cold and flat. There was a long, awkward pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. About that night. At the birthday dinner." I said nothing. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. His guilt was his own problem, not mine. "Carol and Brittany, they were out of line," he continued, his voice weak, completely out of line. I should have said something. You know how Carol gets? "Yes, I do," I thought. "And I know that you're a coward." "They're all so excited for the trip," he said, his voice trailing off, as if he knew he was saying the wrong thing. "They talk about it constantly. Brittany is, well, she's planning to have her engagement party at the resort's big Christmas gala. She just got engaged to her new boyfriend, Liam. A really nice fellow, seems very successful. She keeps talking about how perfect it's all going to be. He was trying to apologize, trying to bridge the gap he had allowed to form, but all he was doing was giving me priceless intelligence. An engagement party. At the gala. It was perfect. The public stage for my reveal was getting bigger and more dramatic with every word he spoke. His cowardice was pathetic, but his information was pure gold. I just wanted you to know I was thinking of you, he finished lamely. I finally spoke, my voice devoid of any warmth. Thank you for the information, Robert. The way I said it, like a boss acknowledging a subordinate's report, seemed to stun him into silence. I have to go, I said, and hung up before he could reply. I leaned back in my chair, a small, cold smile on my lips. He had called seeking to soothe his own conscience, to feel like one of the good guys, but all he had done was hand me the final piece of the puzzle. An unwanted ally, perhaps, but an ally nonetheless. I turned back to the charts on my wall, my focus sharper than ever. The countdown had begun. The final push was a nightmare. The takeover of the Monarch Group, which had started as a secret, strategic acquisition, had turned into an all-out corporate war. Word had leaked. A rival investment firm, smelling blood in the water, started buying up shares, trying to block my path to a majority stake. The price skyrocketed. For 2 terrifying days it felt like everything was going to fall apart. This was my final test. This wasn't a theoretical exercise in Mr. Finch's office anymore. This was real, high-stakes negotiation, a game of chicken, with millions of dollars on the line. The old me would have crumbled. The old me would have listened to the whispers of doubt and backed down, but the old me was gone. They're trying to force us out, Serafina, Mr. Finch said, his voice grim over the phone. We were on a conference call with our legal team at 2 in the morning. I was in my apartment, surrounded by cold coffee cups, my eyes burning from staring at my laptop screen. The other major shareholder, a man named Marcus Thorne, is refusing to sell his block. He's holding out, trying to start a bidding war. Then we end it, I said. My voice surprisingly steady. Get me on the phone with him. Directly. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Serafina, that's highly unorthodox, one of the lawyers began. I don't care about orthodox, I cut in. I care about winning. Set it up. An hour later, I was speaking to Marcus Thorne. His voice was smug and condescending, the voice of a man who thought he held all the cards. He thought he was dealing with some face corporation. He had no idea he was talking to a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I let him talk, let him lay out his arrogant demands. And then, I made my counter-offer. It was bold, audacious, and final. I didn't just offer him a higher price for his shares. I leveraged knowledge our team had dug up about one of his other struggling businesses, and I offered him a strategic lifeline, a way out of a different mess he was in. It was a move my grandmother would have made, using knowledge and leverage, not just brute force. He was silent for a long moment. I could almost hear the calculations whirring in his head. You've done your homework, he said, his voice losing its smugness, replaced by a grudging respect. You have a deal. When I hung up the phone, a wave of lightheadedness washed over me. I had done it. I had faced the dragon and won. The next day, I sat in Mr. Finch's office, the scent of old books and victory in the air. A mountain of paperwork sat on his desk. I signed document after document, my hand steady, my signature a bold, confident script that looked nothing like my old, hesitant scrawl. When the final page was signed, Mr. Finch pushed one last document across the desk towards me. It was thick, bound in a blue cover. It was the master property deed for the Cypress Key Lodge and Spa, and there, on the line for the owner, was my name, Serafina Hayes. I stared at it, the black ink stark against the white paper. I was the owner, the CEO, the boss, The words felt foreign, too large to fit me. A flicker of my old self, the scared, small woman from the dinner party, surfaced for a moment. A wave of doubt washed over me. "Is this too much, Alistair?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is this cruel?" He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, his expression serious. "Serafina, power is not inherently cruel. It is a tool, like a hammer. In the wrong hands, it can be used to destroy, but in the right hands," he said, his eyes meeting mine with an unwavering belief, "it can be used to build. Power is only too much in the wrong hands, my dear. Your hands are the right ones." I looked back down at the deed, at my name. He was right. This wasn't about cruelty. This was about justice. This was about building a new life on the ashes of the old one. I closed the cover on the deed, the sound a solid, satisfying thud. The war was over. The victory was mine. Now all that was left was to claim it. I had eyes and ears inside the resort now. The general manager, a sharp, discreet man named Mr. Daniels, reported directly to me. He had been with the Monarch Group for 20 years and was fiercely loyal to the company, not to its temporary guests. As the new, unseen owner, I had requested daily updates on the Hayes party. It felt strange, almost like spying, but it was necessary. I needed to understand the battlefield before I stepped onto it. Mr. Daniels's reports, delivered via concise, encrypted emails, painted a vivid picture. He described their arrival, Carol sweeping into the lobby as if she already owned the place, immediately finding fault with the temperature of the welcome cider. Brittany, trailing behind her, making a loud, dismissive comment about the decor being a little too rustic for her tastes. Derek, my husband, carrying their bags, a silent, obedient shadow. The most valuable intelligence, however, came from Mr. Daniels's observations of the newest member of their party, Liam, Brittany's fiancé. The neutral observer. "Miss Hayes," the first report read, "an incident occurred at the welcome dinner this evening. Mrs. Carol Hayes was quite sharp with a young waitress regarding the speed of service. The fiancé, Mr. Liam, appeared visibly uncomfortable with the exchange. After Mrs. Hayes and her daughter had moved on, he quietly approached the staff member and apologized on their behalf. An unusual gesture. This was interesting. Liam wasn't one of them. Not really." The second report, the next day, was even more revealing. At the poolside lounge this afternoon, Miss Brittany Hayes was speaking rather loudly about another guest's choice of swimwear. Mr. Liam again seemed unsettled by the public mockery. Later, I overheard him ask Miss Hayes about you. My heart skipped a beat. The report continued, quoting the conversation as best as Mr. Daniels could recall. "Liam. So Derek's wife, Sarah, couldn't make it? What's she like? I feel like I'm the only one who hasn't met her." Brittany, with a roll of her eyes. "Oh, her. The sob story. Honestly, you're not missing anything. She's a total loser. No job, no ambition. We had to leave her behind. She would have been miserable and made everyone else miserable too. You wouldn't like her." My stomach clenched at the familiar sting of the words, even secondhand. But it was Mr. Daniels's final observation that mattered most. "Miss Hayes," it was Mr. Liam's reaction that I found noteworthy. He did not laugh or agree. He was silent for a moment, and his expression was disapproving. He changed the subject shortly thereafter. "It is my assessment that he is not entirely aligned with the family's views." Mr. Daniels was a good general manager and a keen observer of human nature. Liam was my audience. He was the impartial judge who had no prior history with me. His reaction to the family's casual cruelty, his discomfort and disapproval, was the external validation I didn't know I needed. It confirmed that their behavior wasn't normal. It was monstrous. He was seeing the cracks in the perfect family facade, and that made him the most important person in the room. His eventual reaction to the final reveal would be the true measure of my victory. He was the one who would show everyone that I wasn't the crazy, bitter ex-wife. I was the one who had been wronged. I closed the email, a sense of calm settling over me. The stage was set. The cast was in place, and the neutral observer was already beginning to see the truth. The night of the grand Christmas reunion gala was cold and clear, the air so crisp it felt like it could shatter. Stars were scattered across the black velvet sky like a spray of diamonds. The Cypress Key Lodge was lit up, every window glowing with warm golden light, looking exactly like the fantasy in the brochure. My fantasy. I didn't arrive in a flashy limousine or a chauffeured town car. I drove a modest rental sedan, the kind that blends in, the kind that is easily forgotten. I had chosen my armor carefully, a simple, impeccably tailored black dress. It was elegant, understated, and expensive in a way that only those with a true eye for quality would recognize. My hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and the only jewelry I wore was a pair of small, perfect pearl earrings, a gift from my grandmother. I was not there to be loud. I was there to be powerful. I handed the keys to the valet, who took them with a polite nod, unaware that he was speaking to his ultimate boss. I walked through the grand, double-height doors of the main lodge. The lobby was breathtaking. A massive stone fireplace roared at one end, casting a dancing light on the polished wood floors. The air smelled of pine, cinnamon, and well. As I walked towards the ballroom, the staff I passed were models of professional discretion. Mr. Daniels had briefed them. There were no gasps, no fawning greetings, just a series of small reticult nods, a quiet, "Good evening, Miss Hayes," from a passing manager. To any observer, it would look like I was simply a guest. They recognized, but to me, each subtle gesture was a confirmation. This was my house. The sound of music and laughter grew louder as I approached the open doors of the ballroom. I paused in the doorway, my heart giving a single, hard thud against my ribs. I could see them. They were holding court near the center of the room, a glittering island of arrogance in a sea of partygoers. Brittany was the star of the show, radiant in a white sequined dress that shimmered under the chandeliers, her hand held possessively by a handsome, dark-haired man. I knew must be Liam. Carol stood beside her, beaming like a queen mother, her posture radiating smug satisfaction, and next to them, like a well-trained, loyal dog, stood Derek. He was wearing his best suit, a faint, nervous smile plastered on his face as he laughed at something Brittany's new fiancé said. They were a perfect picture of success and happiness, and for a split second, a cold, familiar wave of insecurity washed over me. The old me, the nobody, the failure, wanted to turn and run. My heart hammered in my chest. What was I doing? This was insane. Then my eyes caught on a large, oil-painted portrait hanging on the far wall of the ballroom. It was of a stern-looking man with a formidable mustache, the resort's original founder from a century ago. But in the set of his jaw and the intelligent gleam in his eyes, I saw my grandmother. I thought of her letter, of her unwavering faith. I thought of Mr. Finch's words, "Your hands are the right ones." The fear receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I was not here for them. I was not here to beg for their approval or to plead for a place at their table. I was here for me. I was here to claim what was mine. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a newfound strength. My shoulders straightened. My chin lifted. I smoothed down the front of my simple black dress and took my first step into the ballroom. My first step onto the stage. I didn't have to wait long. I had barely taken 10 steps into the grand ballroom when Brittany spotted me. Her perfectly made-up face, which had been glowing with happiness, twisted into a mask of pure, ugly disbelief. "Oh my God!" she sneered, her voice a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the pleasant hum of conversation. Several heads turned in our direction. Liam, standing beside her, looked from her face to me, his expression one of polite confusion. "What are you doing here?" Brittany continued, taking a step forward, deliberately creating a scene. "Did you follow us? This is a private party. You can't just sneak in. Before I could even respond, Carol was marching towards me, her face a thundercloud of fury. She moved with the speed and purpose of a heat-seeking missile. She stopped just in front of me, her body rigid with indignation. "Serafina," she hissed, her voice low but carrying in the sudden lull of the crowd. "You have some nerve. You were explicitly told you were not welcome. We kicked you out for a reason. You are not family." The drama was escalating perfectly. The circle of onlookers widened. I could see the whispers spreading, the curious and mocking glances. People love a scene, especially when it involves someone being put in their place. In their eyes, I was the pathetic, desperate interloper, crashing a party where I didn't belong. I was the crazy ex, the failure who couldn't let go. "Honestly, the desperation," Brittany said loudly to Liam, though she was looking at me. "Some people have no shame." Carol took it a step further. Her voice rose, becoming shrill and imperious. "Security," she shrieked, looking around wildly. "Security. Get this nobody out of here. She is trespassing." This was the moment. The absolute peak of my public humiliation. All eyes were on me, waiting for me to cry, to scream, to make a scene, to prove them right. And where was my husband in all of this? Derek stood a few feet behind his mother and sister, frozen. His face was pale, his mouth slightly agape. He looked from me to his mother, his eyes wide with a familiar helpless panic. He was a statue of cowardice, a monument to his own weakness. He wouldn't save me. He never would. But the most incredible thing was, I didn't need saving. The intense humiliation, the sting of their words, the weight of 100 pairs of judging eyes. It was all there, but it was happening outside of me. It was like watching a movie of my old life. The insults were just words, sounds that couldn't penetrate the new, calm center I had built within myself. I had been forged in the fire of a much greater struggle over the past few months. This little bonfire of their making was nothing. I remained perfectly still, my expression calm, my hands steady at my sides. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I simply waited. I let them escalate. I let them shout and point and call me names. I let them draw the entire room's attention to this one single spot on the floor. I let them build their own trap, piece by piece. And now, they were standing right in the middle of it. The trap was set. It was time to spring it. Just as Carol shrieked for security a second time, a man in a crisp dark suit began to move briskly through the crowd. He had an earpiece and a lapel pin that identified him as the resort's general manager, Mr. Daniels. Carol saw him coming, and a triumphant, vicious smile spread across her face. "Finally," she said under her breath, turning to me with a look of pure victory. "You're finished." Mr. Daniels navigated the gawking guests with practiced ease. He was heading straight for our little circle of drama. Carol straightened her shoulders, ready to give the order to have me physically removed. But Mr. Daniels walked right past her. He didn't even glance at her. He walked past Brittany. He walked past Derek. He came to a stop, directly in front of me, the person they had just branded a trespassing nobody. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound and unmistakable respect. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice clear, professional, and loud enough for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. "Welcome. I trust everything is to your satisfaction?" The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The world seemed to stop. The music, the chatter, the whispers, it all vanished, sucked into a vacuum of pure, stunned silence. Carol's triumphant smile froze on her face, then melted away, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. "What? What did you just call her?" she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. Mr. Daniels looked at Carol as if she were a curious but irrelevant interruption. "I'm addressing the owner, ma'am," he said simply. "Owner." The word dropped into the silence like a boulder into a still pond, sending shockwaves out in every direction. There was a collective, audible gasp from the crowd. Jaws literally dropped. People who had been smirking at my humiliation were now staring, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Brittany turned pale. The vibrant, celebratory color drained from her face, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. She looked from me to the manager, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. And then the final beautiful piece of the puzzle clicked into place. From the edge of the crowd, a calm, distinguished figure stepped forward. It was Mr. Alistair Finch, looking impeccable in a tailored tuxedo. He had been standing quietly in the corner, my silent ally, waiting for his cue. He approached our little group, carrying an elegant leather briefcase. He opened it with a precise, deliberate click. He didn't address me. He addressed a horrified Carol. "The controlling shares of the Monarch Group," he announced, his voice carrying with the authority of a judge reading a verdict. He held up a thick sheaf of papers, and the deed to this very property. He held up the blue-bound document, all legally transferred to Miss Seraphina Hayes a week ago. He then turned his gaze slightly and looked directly at Liam, Brittany's fiancé. "Congratulations on your engagement, young man," he said with a polite nod. "You're at a lovely party, in a lovely resort, owned by a lovely woman." The validation was absolute. Liam was completely shocked, but it wasn't the horrified shock of his new fiancée. He was staring at me, at the woman who had been called a loser and a sob story just days before, and his face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated astonishment that was quickly morphing into something else: respect. A slow, impressed smile touched his lips, and he took a small but significant step away from Brittany, a physical severing of his alliance with her. I scanned the crowd for the others. I saw Uncle Robert, the enabler, near the back. He looked like he was about to be physically ill, his hand over his mouth, his face a ghastly shade of green. He was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He knew he had backed the wrong side. My gaze finally landed on my family, the antagonists. They were shattered. Brittany looked like her entire world had just been bombed. Carol was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound coming out. And Derek, my husband, he looked like a ghost. He was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. The weak, pathetic woman he had refused to defend was gone. In her place was this owner, this power. With the entire ballroom watching, silent and captivated, I finally spoke. I looked directly at Derek, my voice not loud, not angry, just calm, steady, and cold as ice. "I believe your stay is comped," I said, "but your credit cards, which were tied to my accounts, have all been frozen. Enjoy your last night of living on my dime." I held his gaze for one long final moment. In his eyes I saw the death of his world, the complete and utter destruction of the hierarchy he had worshipped his entire life. He had chosen them, and he had lost everything. I then turned, and without a backward glance at the wreckage of the family that had tried to destroy me, I walked away, the owner of it all. My story is proof that the names people call you, failure, loser, nobody, only have power if you let them. The moment you decide to believe in your own worth is the moment you take that power bay. They tried to write my story for me, so I bought the publishing house. What labels have you refused to accept in your own life? What was the moment you decided to stand up for yourself? I want to hear your stories. Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about taking back your power. Your support means the world. Thanks for watching.